This episode is brought to you by FX's Alien Earth, the official podcast. Each week, host Adam Rogers is joined by guests, including the show's creator, cast, and crew, in this exclusive companion podcast. They will explore story elements, deep dive into character motivations, and offer an episode-by-episode behind-the-scenes breakdown of each terrifying chapter in this new series. Search FX's Alien Earth wherever you listen to podcasts.
This episode is brought to you by Greenlight. Get this. Adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Spotify. Greenlight.com/Spotify.
This episode contains spoilers for Assassin's Creed 3.
This podcast is part of the Robots Radio Rocket Club, a program designed to help all podcasts reach their full potential. For information about joining the Robots Radio Rocket Club, check out robotsradio.net.
Hello, and welcome to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. My name is Austin, also known as Teacup.
And my name is Shelby, also known as She-Cup.
Join us as we embark on unraveling all of your favorite mysteries from the Assassin's Creed universe. From assassins to Templars to the mysterious Isu and more. We will seek to uncover it all, so join us and maybe even take a leap of faith.
Hello and welcome to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. I'm Shelby or She-Cup, and I am your host or guide on this podcast.
Hey, and I am Teacup. I am your lore and game expert, as I have played every game, unlike my co-host.
Correction, you've played every game multiple times.
Yes. I've only finished Valhalla once, though, so I'll give that.
Still, I'm trying not to. I'm like most of the way done with one, finishing up, getting ready to start playing Assassin's Creed 2, and I'm trying to resist the urge to go back and replay Origins.
Well, you still have DLC to do in Origins.
I know, but the main story.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah,
what are we talking about today?
So today is a special episode.
Oh, really?
So as you may know, or may not know, last Tuesday, Assassin's Creed kicked off their 15-year celebration.
They did.
Yeah, which crazy to think that Assassin's Creed Origins and Dragon Age, or no, not Origins, Assassin's Creed 1 and Dragon Age Origins were released the same year.
Really?
2007.
No.
2007. I guess Assassin's Creed and Mass Effect were released the same year. Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
We have too many fandoms.
Yes. But that's crazy to think about. 15 years. That's half my lifetime.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about like how the games have changed. I know that there are a lot of people out there that really hate the new like bloated game style with RPG open world kind of game. But if you really look at how the games have changed from Assassin's Creed 1 to Valhalla, it's really remarkable the progress I think that has been made in video gaming in that time period, regardless of whatever style of game you personally prefer.
Right. And like you're playing technically a remastered version of Assassin's Creed 1 or a re-release version of it.
Gonna be honest, it does not feel that way.
Right. So that's not what it originally looked like. And, you watched me play Revelation for a little bit, and that is also remastered. So it's crazy to think about the graphical and like mechanic change and shift that has come to that. But it's also like innovative to the game. Like if you compare Black Flag to Odyssey, yes, there's a significant jump, but like for what it is, Black Flag is amazing from a graphical standpoint.
Right.
But anyway, speaking of Black Flag, Today, we are doing a kind of hybrid episode. It's still continuing in our kind of Assassins versus Templar conflict, in that we're going to look at the American Revolution. But because the history with the Assassins in the American Revolution centers around a very, very important character in the games, we're going to kind of do a hybrid character deep dive, Assassins versus Templar, on the assassin Ratonhnhake, who also known as Connor Kenway.
So are you thinking this episode will be a 2-part series?
It definitely will, because there is a lot of information. Assassin's Creed 3 is a long game, and a lot happens, which makes sense because, yes, there are starting points to the Revolutionary War, but there's stuff that happens before it that leads up before the official war, and there's stuff that happens after it. And so it's longer than like the actual like dates of the war are.
Well, that's how every war is.
Yes.
No war in history, when we measure the start date of a war with such and such battle or such and such conflict or event, that's never really the beginning of the war. What is the beginning of the war is the context that leads up to that specific conflict.
Right. So anyway, Connor, or Ratonhnhake, is born in 1756. His parents are Haytham Kenway and Connor, his mother, those are his parents, and his mother is a member of, and I'm going to try with this one, but it's very complicated, Connor Kenway, which is also more commonly known as the Mohawk tribe. For those of you who are not aware, all the tribe names that we often know for the Native American tribes, they have other names in their language. And so where you might hear the Mohawk tribes, this is their actual name, which I give props to Assassin's Creed for using it and figuring it out. But they're a member of the Iroquois Confederation, which, if you don't know for history, is a confederation of 5. It's officially 5 nations. I believe it's actually more than that all kind of came together as like one people, and they united, especially around kind of the colonial times, to negotiate and kind of be more organized with the European settlers.
And important to note, the Iroquois Confederation is also located in the like New England Northeast section of the United States, what is now known as the United States.
Yes. So Ratonhnhake, his first few years were spent really happily living among his people in their village with his mother. He would go out and play hide and seek and other games with his children friend. However, in 1760, sorry, the date's in my head, but 1760, so math, he is 4 years old. 4 years old. Colonial Templars, led by none other than Charles Lee, find him outside his village, and they basically assault him, a 4-year-old. And he inquires to who these men are, and Charles Lee arrogantly gives him his name. And he swears that he will find Charles Lee and basically like make him pay, and the Templar basically brushes off this statement, and then like they hit him with the butt of a rifle and knock him out. Do you have thoughts?
I always have thoughts about Charles Lee.
Did you see my notation in the show notes?
Yeah, it just says, ugh, for all of you listening. I will also share this fun little tidbit. I know we haven't gotten there yet to George Washington, but I had a professor in college, and I was a history minor. I had a professor in college who would always say, when we talked about American revolutionary generals and leaders in the war, she would always say, George Washington could talk you into eating your own socks. He was that gifted of a public speaker. And then she would say that. And then she would always say, and then there's Charles Lee. And then she'd move on. So we don't think too highly of Charles Lee in this household, I guess.
No, and we'll get to why we won't get to why in this episode, but part 2.
Okay, but we have already established, we don't even need to get to why. This story, not to take us too far off topic, but this story about Connor Kenway being abused and knocked out and harassed and attacked as a 4-year-old kid by agents of Charles Lee is enough. Like, that in itself would make me hold a vendetta against the man for the rest of eternity.
And it's not over.
I know. This is the very first thing you said about him, and I'm already like, nope, trash.
All right. So when he wakes up, he finds that his village is on fire. And he rushes into the village. He's going all across this like burning village. When you're playing it in the game, like, you're having to move around fire. And like, the way they modeled him, he looks more like an 8 or 9-year-old. But to learn that he's 4 just makes it all ridiculous. But after that, he rushes into where like his mother's house is, and it's too late. He finds her underneath a beam that's collapsed. She yells at him to get out and not leave her. He stubbornly refuses but he's not strong enough to move anything or save her, and he's dragged out by another member of the tribe as the building collapses completely onto his mother, and she dies. And it's important to note that after this point, Connor blames the fire on Charles Lee. He just assumes that, which is rightly, naturally so, he assumes that they're the ones who set this, and so it sets a fire in him to get vengeance and justice for the death of his mother, and a sense of like, these white men are coming and trying to take over everything. I want to fight against that tyranny.
And you know what? Not only that, I would imagine that as a child, in his mind, once he grows up, he probably looks back on this moment as the moment in his life where everything changed. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people experience that. You know, we often have things in our lives, whether it's the death of a parent or a grandparent or family member, or your sibling moving away, or a fire that burns down your house, or whatever it may be, where everything is different after that happens. And we often long for what life was like before the bad thing happened, when we see it as idyllic. And so if I was him, I would absolutely blame Charles Lee for this shift and all of it. So I understand that reaction.
Right. And this is a common theme across the assassins who join up with the Brotherhood. They often join up or kind of start their journey after a super traumatic event. We have this with Connor. We have, Ezio joins up after his family is killed. Edward has his own trauma that he deals with. It's a little less direct. And even the opposite in Rogue, when you have Shay Cormac, like, there's a traumatic event, the Lisbon earthquake, that moves him over to the Templars. And that's just a really like realistic thing. Oftentimes when we face these extremely traumatic events, they force us to question what we already know about the world. And so that gets us to rethink that, and might cause us to drastically change or have a turning point in our life. It's good storytelling because it's something that almost everyone can relate to, regardless of your background and what's happening with you. So we're fast forwarding a little bit, 9 years. So he's now 13. And so around the time, like, this is kind of iffy, but like, this is like normally like 13 when like puberty starts and all of that most cultures, like, that's your entrance into adulthood. So nothing is different here. That's what happens with Ratonhnhake when he goes in there, and the clan mother comes and asks to speak with him privately. She shows him a piece of Eden, though she doesn't call it a piece of Eden, and explains that it is this that they're protecting that is the reason why they can't leave their valley. So right now there's a rule that they don't venture out beyond the valley because they're protecting this piece of Eden. It's an apple of Eden. And so when she shows it to him, the piece of Eden activates and it takes him on a spirit journey, is what they call it, where the Isu Juno tells him he is needed to help save the world. And if he continues on his current path, that the world will fall to ruin. And she tells him that he needs to seek a certain symbol to understand his path. And that symbol is the assassin A symbol.
Whatever could the A mean?
I don't know. Upon regaining consciousness, he finds himself at the edge of the valley by a river. As he drew the symbol he had been shown in the sand, the clan mother asked where he saw it, and he explains the spirit journey that he went through. And the clan mother said she understood what he was being asked to do, and she directed him to a homestead that lay east of where they were, closer into kind of what would be like middle of nowhere, Massachusetts, New York, that kind of area. The frontier is been what it would have been called, where she claimed to have seen the symbol before. So he crosses the frontier and he arrives at this rundown manor. Several days later, he's knocked on the door and is greeted by an elderly black man. And he says, like, when he comes, he's like, "I'm here for training." And the man waves him on and shuts the door in his face. So he stays the night in the stables and tries again. The next day, meets with the same response. Naturally, as most video game protagonists are, he's incredibly stubborn. And so he doesn't give up, and he bangs on the manor's back door. He climbs up on the balcony where the man comes out and basically throws him on the ground and says, "Move on. There's no need to be an assassin. The world has already forgotten us." And so he returns to the stable, angrily calling back that he would not leave until he trained him. And this is a common storytelling device across different mythologies of the persistently asking the old master to train you, to be denied again. And it's not insignificant that this happens 3 times before something changes.
Yeah, that's a very common number throughout literature, religion, storytelling, just generally. Three times. Like, there's a reason that we have a 3 strikes and you're out rule just in our world.
Right. And there's an old rabbinical saying that talks about the number 3, and it says once is a coincidence, 2 times is happenstance, and three times is an act of God. And that's kind of where that comes into play there. And so that night, after the 3rd attempt, bandits come onto the homestead. They pass by the stable as they discuss their plan to attack, not thinking anyone overheard them. And so Ratonhnhake, he is woken up by their voices and asks them what they are doing. Naturally, seeing that someone has seen them, the thugs attack him. He's not an unaccomplished fighter, so he's able to fend off most of them, though he's knocked out again. This is a common theme happening with this kid. And they wake him up and questioning him whether he was working for the owner of the homestead. At that moment, the old man comes out to his rescue, stabbing the bandit leader in the back. He told Ratonhnhake to clean up the mess, and then he follows him into the manor so they could talk. This man is Achilles Davenport, mentor of the Colonial Brotherhood, and he takes Connor under his wing and teaches him about the Assassins and Templars, the history. He teaches him about his father, his own ancestry, and he shows him like the basement where he has a list of all the Colonial Templars. He has assassin robes and a pair of hidden blades.
Can I ask you a question?
Uh-huh.
So this man was the man with the house that he was on, and his name is
Achilles Davenport.
Okay, so you said that Achilles taught Connor Ratonhnhake about his father and his parents.
Mm-hmm.
So Haytham is the dad.
Mm-hmm.
And he did not like live in the village and help raise his son.
No. So there's a little backstory. Haytham is sent to the colonies to kind of establish a Templar presence in there. And in that process, he not only succeeds in dismantling the entire Assassin Brotherhood down to where it's just Achilles left, with the help of Cormac, and he also is sent there to track down a renegade Templar and kill him, basically. Edward Braddock is his name, during the 7 Years' War. And so he meets Connor's mother in that process, and they strike up kind of a very quick love affair that ends in his conception, and they go their separate ways. But Haytham was an assassin before he became a Templar, because his father is Edward Kenway, and he was raised to be an assassin, but he's manipulated and moved over to the Templars.
Right, I knew that.
Yeah. So that's how Achilles knows about Haytham and is keeping track of him.
Sure, and that's fine. So I had another question, but I forgot. Oh, okay. So Haytham is he in the colonies at this time?
Yes.
Okay.
He comes into the colonies before 1756.
And he does stay. He just doesn't stay with his son.
No, he's moving around. They're located in Boston, is their kind of headquarters.
Okay, I understand.
Boston and New York.
All right, let's get back to the content.
All right. So Achilles trains Ratonhnhake for the next few months at the homestead, teaching him all the things that he needs, climbing, though he's already a pretty good climber himself, being the background that he grows up in, how to fall without taking a lot of damage, how to fight, how to stay hidden, all the vital skills that you would need to be an assassin, in a hope to shorten the gap between him and Haytham. Because Haytham has years of experience, not only as a Templar, but also as an assassin. And so that's what made him so deadly to the Assassin's Brotherhood, is because he knew all their tricks. So in March of 1770, so keeping track, he is 14 at this point, Achilles invites Ratonhnhake to come to Boston with him, where he needs to purchase supplies for repairing the manor. And so Achilles, when they get there, he tells Ratonhnhake that he should adopt a different name than his name, so that he could move easily. And he says something that just kind of breaks your heart. He says, we'll name you Connor, and people will just think that you're Spanish or Italian. And both of those are being better than me. And he goes, better to be Spanish or Italian than native or like me. And
my heart breaks.
And Connor, in his sweet, teenage self, just goes, that's not true.
Yeah.
So he sends Connor on a bunch of lists, a list with supplies he needs to gather. He passes by. And so once he purchases it, he finds Achilles in a crowd that's rioting and yelling at the British soldiers to leave Boston. I think you know what's going to happen, Shelby.
I'll let you tell us.
Connor returns to Achilles' side, and they observe the uproar until they spot Haytham Kenway speaking to another man in the crowd. Achilles, worried that the Templars would worsen an already delicate situation, sent Connor to discover what Haytham and his associates were planning. Spoiler alert, they did indeed worsen the situation. So Connor, even though he wants to go after his father, and as any 14-year-old kid would want to, be like, okay, I'm going to go after my father. I want to talk to my dad. He obeys Achilles' instructions and follows the man instead. Connor tailed him up to the rooftops where he's able to stop the man from firing a shot in the crowd. However, Charles Lee, who had been standing on the rooftop, had, on the opposite side of the street, fired his pistol into the air and caused British soldiers to attack Boston citizens out of startlement.
Of course they did.
I just want to pause here and, like, if this was true, like, if this came out that Charles Lee started the Boston Massacre, I feel like our entire view of, like, the revolution and history would change.
I think that's probably fair. Because we in, like, American society and just, like, the way we look at ourselves, we always think of the revolution as something that, like, oh, this was this organic, like, spur of the moment from the people, organized resistance, and everyone supported it, and it was just like what we were supposed to do, and it was the right thing. But half of that is not even in the realm of reality. Like, first of all, the revolution was extraordinarily controversial. Not everyone supported it. A lot of people wanted the security of being under the care of the British Empire. We didn't want to strike out on our own. Lots of people felt that way. Right. But even more so, like, we take this folksy view of it where it's like, oh yeah, they just rose up against those evil guys. But if we really looked at it a little bit closer, that's not always true. And if this was the situation with Charles Lee, I think that would definitely change that kind of conception.
Right. And, like, from a historical perspective, like, the American Revolution kind of already shows the divide between the northern colonies and the southern colonies, because primarily the number of loyalists were in the southern colonies or the southern states. They existed in there, but there was far more support for the revolution in, like, New York and Boston and Massachusetts and Connecticut and Rhode Island, all these places, whereas there was not as much support for them in South Carolina, North Carolina,
right.
Virginia.
And that goes back to money.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who were pushing for the revolution were mostly, this is a large generalization, but the people who were pushing for the revolution, for independence, were people who had money, who didn't want to see more of their money taken by the British. The people who were like, no, like, my life is okay, like, we should keep things the same, are people who are poorer, who didn't have as much money, who could be taken by the British.
Right. But that's why the war ends in Chesapeake Bay and the Battle of Yorktown. And so, because it took so much longer to get through the Southern campaign, because they didn't have as much support. And it also goes back to, like, the Southern states' economy wasn't real. I mean, it was kind of based on trade with England a little bit, but not to the extent that it was in the northern colonies, where they were getting taxed on, like, tea and other exports like that. Whereas, yeah, sure, the southern colonies were probably getting taxed on a lot of that too, but they were also providing resources directly to the colonies as well.
That's true. And we'd also be remiss if we didn't talk about the impact that slavery and the industry of slavery has on this conversation too.
Right. Yes. So in the confusion, Haytham approaches one of the guards and points out Connor. At this point, he doesn't know who he is, prompting several troops to pursue him through the city. And later they accuse him of firing the first shot, of saying that he was the one who started all this.
They accuse Connor of that.
Yes. And so Connor does eventually escape Boston and clears his name with the help of none other than Samuel Adams, who helps him walk around and kind of talks about the Sons of Liberty and the freedom. And there's really good conversation where I love this conversation because he's all talking about freedom, and Connor basically just says the man who owns a slave.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, and then Samuel Adams gets all defensive. But you already see that, like, this is very early on, and important with Connor is that you see very early on his disillusionment with the white settlers and their revolution and their so-called freedom.
But
very early on.
I don't even think it's disillusionment, though, because to be disillusioned with something is to say that you once were a person who saw that thing with positivity through, good eyes. Like, you looked at it as if it was a good thing, and now you are not. Now you've been disillusioned with that thing. I don't think Connor or Ratonhnhake ever looked at the United States or freedom or the revolution with, a good lens. Like, he never saw, this is a good thing.
Right. Well, and he probably just saw that, like, being trained as an assassin, he's learned to look at the world and say, like, the war that I'm fighting is beyond any, squabble between nations or anything like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so after returning to the homestead, Connor is mad at Achilles for basically abandoning him. But Achilles calmly remarks that the day of experience had been more valuable than months of training. And in acknowledgement of his achievement, Achilles finally entrusts Connor with his first set of hidden blades. Isn't that just like some kind of teacher to just be like,
yeah,
oh yeah, I did this, but like experience, like we had a teacher when we were in grad school that used to always say, it's a leadership opportunity.
Yeah. It is annoying, but I'll say that I say that now too sometimes. So
right. Yeah. So let's take our break real quick.
Sure.
All right.
All right. Welcome to the middle of the show. And this is the time where we talk about all things that have to do with the Assassin's Creed lore cast, but not necessarily the actual lore of the Assassin's Creed universe. So my first thing that I want to tell you is that the biggest way to help us right now is to give us a review online, to like and share our show. You can leave us a review with words on Apple. And if you do, we'll read it out on the show. And if you leave us a word, just ratings on Spotify, that also really helps us. Austin, do we have any reviews to read today?
We have one, too.
Awesome. Why don't you read it for us?
All right. This comes from Hasselhoff, 5 stars. He says, even the Isu would learn from this podcast. And he says, the Cups have done it again, delving into the memories of the ancestors to bring an amazing show. As a longtime fan of Assassin's Creed, I love it when my favorite game is talked about, and this podcast does not disappoint. Austin and Shelby bring their unique take on the lore and make it easy and enjoyable to listen to. Next time you jump into an Animus, put this show on and listen to.
Thanks, Hasselhoff. Hasselhoff is also a listener of our other show, the Dragon Age Lorecast, and left us a review over there. So we are super appreciative for sure.
I want to know, Hasselhoff, is there a game that you don't play? But yes, thank you for the support, and we really appreciate that.
Yeah, so coming soon, we will be launching a Patreon. So if you want to support us financially, stay tuned for that development. It's not live yet, but it will be soon. Also, in addition, you can also join our Discord servers. We have our own Discord server called the Cups Podcasting and More server, and that's the home of all of our podcasts. This one, as well as the Dragon Age Lorecast and Teacup's other podcast, the Holocron Histories show, which analyzes and talks about the difference in Star Wars canon versus legend. So all 3 of those shows have a home at the Cups Podcasting and More server. We also talk about all 3 of those shows, post a lot of memes post a lot of pet photos, and just generally have a good time. Or you can also join us on the Robots Radio Discord server. We are members of the Robots Radio Rocket Club, and there are so many awesome shows that are part of this network, both in the Rocket Club and as full members of Robots Radio. There are so many awesome shows that you can find and learn more about. So join us over there as well, and there will be links in our episode description to join both of those Discord servers. Austin, is there anything else that I have forgotten?
No, just shouting out the Discord too. Just piggybacking on that, and if you feel like I need to stay up to date on all the news that's happening with the podcasting network, Discord server is the place for that.
Yeah, the Discord, especially the Cups Discord, they always hear everything first.
Yes.
So if you want to join in on that, make sure you head over there.
All right, that's all we got.
That's all we got for the mid show.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, let's get back into it.
All right. So sometime after the Boston Massacre, not too long, maybe a couple years or a couple months, Achilles instructs Connor to meet him at the homestead's dock in order to look something over that he simply called an asset. And it's a interesting scene there because it's like the typical mentor way of like, he's like, hey, come over here. And Connor in his like youth and teenage years is like, what do you want? What is it? And it's just like an asset.
Yeah, it's like that whole, like, let me be cryptic and make you think about this for 3 days before I actually tell you the way that mentor.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
and so
it's the ancient, or not ancient, but like historical version of your professor sending you an email and being like, come see me on Tuesday.
Yeah. But anyway, so when he arrives, he sees the remains of a ship in disrepair as well as a small shack overlooking the bay. He and Achilles enter the shack and meet with Robert Faulkner, the first mate of the ship in the harbor, the Aquila. Connor offered to pay for her repairs, and Robert gladly agreed to gather a crew for the vessel and restore her sailing capability. So they sail up to Martha's Vineyard and they repair the Aquila, and Connor quickly takes to sailing like he's in his blood. Which Achilles comments, it is.
That's exactly what I was about to say. I was literally like, it is in his blood. Literally.
Yeah. And so he talks about, and this is a great scene because this came out before Black Flag. And so there was already plans of like, they knew who Edward Kenway was before the game even came out.
Taking a page out of Dragon Age book with that one.
Yeah. Well, and like a lot of the Assassin's Creed games, they really rely on these kind of mythological characters that surround historical events. For example, in Valhalla, like Eivor is based on an actual historical figure or several historical figures who were kind of bridges between Saxon and the Danish or Norse raiders, I guess is what I'll call them.
So like Uhtred?
Yeah, like Uhtred.
Let's get back to the American Revolution, though.
Yeah. And so when he finally returns, Connor is berated by Achilles, who accused him as leaving for so long without as much as a goodbye. Nevertheless, Achilles led Connor down to the manor basement in order to bestow on him the assassin robes. Though Achilles admitted that the order usually had a ceremony for such an occasion, neither he or Connor seemed the type for such things. Instead, after Connor had donned the robes, Achilles simply verbally welcomed him into the Brotherhood of Assassins. And I think that just shows like where the Assassins Brotherhood is at in the colonial period. Like, you know, when you're in the Italian Brotherhood, there's all this pomp and circumstance and ceremony around joining it because they're a well-established organization. And it's an important thing, whereas like the colonial Brotherhood is very much on like, we're doing what we can to survive. And we don't have time. We don't have the luxury of pomp and circumstance.
Right. We don't have the luxury of a ceremony or like gold plated robe, like all this fancy stuff that that Ezio has.
Yes. Later that year, Connor's childhood friend, Kane Tokan, he visits Connor at the homesteads and brings news that one of the Templars, William Johnson, was attempting to lay claim on their nation's land without their consent. Not surprised.
No.
Outraged by the thought, rightfully so, Connor immediately decides to seek out Johnson. Though Achilles tries to keep him from acting rashly, Connor argued that he made a promise to protect his people. And there's this big scene where Connor basically takes a hatchet and he buries it into the banister of the house. And it's a symbol of starting a war. When a war starts in their tribe, they would put a hatchet into the tree and only take it out when the war was over. And then, so it's all dramatic. And then Achilles says, well, could you have just done it in a tree and not the house?
He has a point.
Right. They were in a forest, so a thing. So Connor quickly goes to Boston, where William Johnson operates out of, and he meets up with Samuel Adams, who offered to help him in finding Johnson, but only after he helped Adams cripple Johnson's tea exhortation. Which this starts a relationship with Connor's introductory into the revolution is through the Sons of Liberty. Which is all the patriots in the Boston area, really.
So here's a question. Are there any assassins in England? I know we've talked about how the Templars they have a stronghold in Britain, but I'm just curious if there are any assassins in England, and if so, did they ever fight for the British?
At this point, no, because at the start of the game, Haytham kills the last big assassin in England.
Okay.
And there are still assassins in England, but they are in no position to kind of interfere with what's going on in the colonies. The only place that they could potentially get assistance is from the West Indies Brotherhood. But as you know, the West Indies Brotherhood is dealing with the Haitian slave revolt at this time. And they don't have the resources to send people their way.
Right.
So
I guess I was just curious because Connor is clearly aligning himself with the American revolutionaries and not at all the British.
Part of it is that the Templars are backing the British at the very beginning.
Right. And I guess I'm thinking about this in terms of real history, maybe too much, because not all of the natives just blindly supported the Americans.
No, in fact, it was the opposite. Most of them sided with the British in that and part of this is because the British were imposing land restrictions on the colonists. The British were basically honoring the treaties they made with the tribes and keeping the colonists from expanding. So a lot of the native tribes saw the British as we'll fight and help you because you're keeping this expansion at bay.
Right. So that kind of is interesting to me, at least, because Connor is indigenous. Did his tribe support the British? Do we know any of this?
Stand by.
Okay.
Yeah, there's more to that, and it's not as black and white, say, as maybe the Spanish Inquisition was, where the Templars were on one side and the assassins were on the other. The problem we're not seeing a lot on both sides is because there is no the brotherhoods are dismantled. Connor is the only assassin operating in the colonies right now.
Well, Achilles
is staying back at the manor. He's not really fit to do something. He's also gravely injured.
Okay. Sorry, I keep getting us off.
All right. So back to it. During this assistance, Connor meets Stefan chateau. It's French. That's what I'm going with. A French taverner, and helped him ward off a tax collector who was harassing them. Soon after, Stéphane went into a violent rage and caused riots around Boston against the Loyalists. After finding the main overseer of the tea's transportation, Connor had Stéphane assassinate him, taking him on as an apprentice for the Brotherhood. And there are I'm not going to go into them all, but there are several missions throughout the game where Connor kind of takes on these assassin apprentices.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's got to rebuild the order.
Right. But I'll get into something important in a minute.
Okay.
Or later in the episode. So Connor then helps thwart Johnson's tea empire through the Boston Tea Party. He helps them sneak on and defends the Sons of Liberty as they throw tea out of the harbor, throwing a couple cases himself. And he thinks that's the end. He doesn't kill William Johnson at this point, and he says, okay, like we crippled his empire. He doesn't have the funds to buy this land anymore. Much to the chagrin of Achilles, who says, nah, you should have killed him. And turns out Achilles is right, because the Templars have unlimited resources, it seems. And in 1774, his friend returns to him and tells him that when William Johnson is attempting to negotiate with the Iroquois chiefs at his home, Johnson Hall. Though the chiefs would not give up their land and claim that Johnson's efforts to protect them were hollow promises, Johnson decides then to use violence to motivate them. Hey, our critique of you is that we don't actually think that you're going to protect us. Okay, well then I'm going to hurt you. What? Way to prove them right. Connor quickly assassinates Johnson from a tree above him, and in his dying word, Johnson claims that he was not after the land for profit, but sought to protect the natives against colonial expansion. Connor rejects this notion and claims that the colonists have no conflict with the Iroquois. Spoiler alert, they did in fact have conflict with the Iroquois. I think this shows Connor is 18 at this point. It kind of shows a little bit of his naivete.
His prefrontal cortex is still not developed fully.
Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't believe William Johnson either, because he's a Templar and he wants the land for whatever reason the Templars want it, which for Connor as an assassin and as a native means exploitation. White people want my land for exploitation. They don't want to protect me. So later that year in 1774, a messenger arrived at the homestead bearing a request for Connor to aid a man named Paul Revere. Connor politely refused the offer, frowning on the fact that the Sons of Liberty mistook him as one of their own. However, when Achilles pointed out that the Templar John Pitcairn was mentioned within the letter, the assassin relented and he goes, fine, okay. But again, you see this thing of Connor is I do not want to be part of this revolution. This revolution does not benefit me. It occasionally benefits the assassin's cause.
Right. And that's what's interesting about this is he's so dedicated to the assassins. And I feel and I haven't played the game, so I fully, so I don't know, but I feel he very much wants to honor his heritage as an indigenous person, but he does not give a crap about the revolution, even though at times he's aligned with it, only because it aligns with his goals. Right.
And in the game, you see this, Connor has a very, this is how the world is. This is a very, matter of fact, I don't mess around. That's just how I am. That's my personality. He does have humor to him and he can, find joy, but he is devoted to the assassins because he sees it as a method to get justice for the death of his mother. And he is intensely devoted to the cause. And I think that he is probably one of the best examples of what it means to be an assassin, because that he does not care about the leaders of the revolution. He does not care about benefiting them. He does not care whether which one of them is in power. He cares about what's going to affect the people of the colonies, whether that's the indigenous people or the settlers, the everyday person who he doesn't care that, Samuel Adams has difficulty doing his big empire. He cares about like Stefan, this tavern owner who can't keep his business open because of the British taxes. And so that's why he's kind of moving to this point of like, I care about the little people. And as I say this, all I'm thinking is like, this is the assassin for Shelby.
Yep. 100%. I'm like, yeah, this is me. And also it very much, if there's anyone out there who also plays Dragon Age, it also very much reminds me of Sarah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very different. So he meets with Paul Revere and he is disappointed that Pitcairn is not present. However, Revere recruits him to help in writing, warn the inhabitants of Lexington and Concord about the British Army. So Connor is writing with Paul Revere in his famous "The British Are Coming," with the promise of, and he does this with the promise of locating Pitcairn later. After the ride, Connor joins the Continental Army at Lexington, where a bloody battle ensued. Pitcairn was present at the fight, but Connor chose to help in the defense of the town rather than pursue his true target. And this is why I say that Connor is really an example of what it truly means to be an assassin, because he's not going to risk the lives of the people he's trying to protect to get his Templar target. He's always going to defend the everyday person over going after one person.
Right.
And so later, Samuel Adams accompanies Samuel Adams to George Washington induction as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. Midway through Washington's speech, Connor heard the voice of Charles Lee, who was sitting behind him, and he immediately stood to confront Lee. But Samuel quickly intervened, pulling him away and attempting to distract him by introducing him to Washington. So this is happening
in the middle?
Yeah, while Washington is addressing the Continental Congress, and he just like gets up, like Charles Lee saying something, and he just like swears, and he just goes, "Charles Lee," and like turns up and faces him. I'm like, did everyone not see this? No one stopped the speech. No one turned to say. I would be like, whoa, what's happening?
But if only Samuel Adams had let Connor kill Charles Lee at that moment, a lot of problems would have been solved.
Right. And so later, Connor is directed to Bunker Hill, where the forces of Israel Putnam were engaging the British troops of Pitcairn. He actually starts, apparently, and I did not know this, our famous Battle of Bunker Hill does not start at Bunker Hill, and they commented on it. And
I did know that.
It starts like a couple miles in the other direction, and then they end up on Bunker Hill. But like the famous whites of their eyes scene doesn't happen at Bunker Hill.
No.
And so Connor offered to Putnam to help in his disabling of ships that were basically, so in the harbor around where they had British naval forces that were basically shelling down on the colonial army, pinning them down. Connor offers to go and destroy those ships that would help the Continental Army retreat and would help drive Pitcairn out of hiding. Whether or not Pitcairn retreats to his camp and Connor crosses basically kind of the no man's land area of the battle, and he infiltrates the camp and he moves along the treetops in the same way as he does with William Johnson. He assassinates Pitcairn like off his horse onto the ground. And Pitcairn, as he dies, gives similar justification that he was trying to give a quick British victory to minimize the losses that were happening. And Connor's, again, not buying it. He's like, you don't care about lives, you care about power. And he takes a letter from his body that gave evidence of an assassination plot on George Washington's life.
Interesting.
And that's where we'll end for part 1.
Oh, wow. On that cliffhanger?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I think you're right. I do like Connor a lot so far.
Yeah, I do. We'll save kind of like our big thoughts for the end of the next episode. But Connor, he's not everyone's favorite assassin, but he's my favorite assassin.
Okay.
I really enjoyed playing as him. I enjoyed his take. And I'll say a little bit more, but I think like this take on the American Revolution is like the opposite of what I think about the take on the Salem witch trials.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think the lens in which we see through an indigenous person on the American Revolution is an important one.
I agree. I really agree. And that's what I was going to say, like, at the end of all this. But I think there are times in Assassin's Creed where, actually, most times in Assassin's Creed, they take liberty with the actual history. And there are times they get it really right, and there are times they get it really wrong. And I think that this, with Connor, is a time they get it right.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting. And I'm very, very pleased with, like, the respect and authenticity that was given to the native tribes in this game.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a couple stereotypes, there are a couple whatever that they fall into just because they're human, but it's pretty good.
Awesome. Well, unless you have anything else to talk about, I think we should wrap it up.
Yeah, that's all I got.
All right. Well, join us next week on the Assassin's Creed Lorecast for part 2.
All right.
Thanks for listening to the Assassin's Creed Lorecast. You can find us on Twitter at Assassin's Creed Lorecast, or you could talk to us on Discord in the Robots Radio Discord or our personal Discord server, both links found in this episode's descriptions. Thank you for listening, and always stay to the shadows to serve the light, Assassins.
Have you ever wanted to deep dive into the lore and stories behind all your favorite Marvel movies? Then do we have the show for you. I'm Captain Shenko.
And I'm Psych88. Join us as we dissect the media megalith that is the MCU. We'll talk about the origin stories, the fights, and everything in between.
The MCU Lorecast releases on all major podcasting platforms on Mondays as part of the Robots Radio Rocket Club and can be found on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.